Hey Matt, Lisa, how you going? Yeah. Did you have a Kit Kat? Yeah. Oh, good, good. Hey, we're just waiting on Felicity to log in. Okay, great. Hey Felicity, spot on 2 o'clock. Yep, I know, perfect. Alright, great. So everyone's got their microphones on, obviously? Beautiful. Okay. So thanks for being so prompt with coming back, particularly to the second session, because we do have a little bit more in this session than what we did in the previous one. So that's much appreciated. So we are doing session 2 now, and this one here I called that one explaining and presenting workplace information. So the previous session was all about identifying data and collecting data. Now we're going to go about explaining it and presenting it in logical formats that people in your organisation can understand and people can interpret. Okay, so this particular session focuses on the learning objectives, which are basically the third and the fourth elements outlined in the unit outline for collect, analyse and present workplace data and information. So that can be found on the training.gov website, the TLIE 4006, and we're focusing on elements 3 and 4, explaining information and presenting workplace information. I've got a link there in that unit outline I've given you, so that will take you directly to the training.gov website. So quickly, it'll take you to this website here. Okay, that's quite a common one. That was updated back in October 2015. So this is quite a new release. Very similar to the previous one. In fact, it's equivalent to the previous unit for this course. It was part of transport and logistics. But basically, if you scroll down and take a look at the elements and performance criteria, in this particular session, we'll be taking a look at element number 3, explaining information, and element number 4, workplace information. And see all of these objectives here, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 4.1, 4.5. That particular section there, we'll be focusing on those today. Okay. And here they are here for your record, those performance criteria. Okay, so today, this particular session, we'll be focusing on all of this stuff and all of this stuff. We'll be focusing on these particular sections. So how do you explain and present data in your workplace? We'll take a look at what you're currently doing. We've got a video we'll watch too, which gives a really good rundown about the different types of data and storage information in databases. I thought that was quite good, so we'll take a look at that. We'll also review different ways of summarising data. So what's the purpose of the data? Taking a look at tables, charts and graphics. We've got bar charts, line graphs, tables and pie charts we'll take a look at. How it's effective to present that data. We'll adapt content for different audiences, ensuring that what we present is appropriate. Understanding data and making conclusions. So suggestions for business improvement. How can you improve your business based on the data you've collected? I'll answer some questions and discuss the importance of being professional and truthful. I'll also talk about working with others to proofread documents and ensure that they're correct before you forward them on. We'll have a bit of a discussion And we'll also take a look at the Privacy Act, that is the legislation surrounding privacy, ensuring that your data is kept under lock and key, particularly the sensitive data. Okay, so probably the first question I'm going to put to you, if you can talk in my ear, if you can throw these answers back to me, is how do you explain and present data in your workplace? Now, I understand that a lot of you are in the process of getting jobs, you've just finished study. Think about either what you've done during your studies at university or TAFE, or your previous studies. And if you can talk amongst yourself and also talking to speaker as much as possible, because that way I can get your information too. There's only so much that this recording can record, so I don't think your voices are coming through this recording because of the feedback that we're going to get when we listen to it. So definitely yell into the microphone and tell me the different ways that you've explained and presented data in your workplace. Let's do that now. Okay, so talking amongst your teams, yes? Email, yep. So we've got discussions, sending and receiving emails, yes? PowerPoint, yep. We've taken a look at PowerPoint today already, haven't we? Yep, slideshows, so that would be using things like PowerPoint too. Yep. Yep, so things like on screen, yep. That's a good one, Matt, yep. How about yourself, Felicity? Any ideas there? Okay, so an electronic projector. Yep, we've also got the old school projectors too, which are basically phased out, but I have used those in tutorials before, so the old-fashioned projectors with the laminate. Yep. Okay. Just some others just to throw out there in case you haven't thought of them. Things like talking in groups, writing on pieces of paper, showing images or showing pictures to represent the data are other ways you can do that. And you can do that in the forms of having posters, having large A2, A3 posters. They're quite helpful too. Butcher's paper, that helps. You could also use computer programs to help present that data in logical format. Okay, excellent. Alright, so you already know quite a lot about data. Brilliant. Alright, so we're going to watch a video now, which I think gives a really good rundown about what data is. I found it on the web. It's about a 5-minute video. It takes a look at, well, it really gives a good rundown about what data is. So let's take a look at that. It takes a look at the digital and analog data. So this should play automatically in just a moment. I'm taking it from a website, a good website I came across, study.com, very useful. And let's play this now. I'm going to try and get it full screen, hopefully. Here we go.
Data are basic values or facts. Note that the term data is considered plural in the scientific community, as in the data are collected, not the data is collected. However, not everyone follows this, so sometimes you'll see data used as a singular. Every task a computer carries out works with data in some way. Without data, a computer would be pretty useless. It is therefore important to understand how to represent and organize data. This lesson will look at different types of data used in computer systems, how they are represented in digital form, and how they are organized in databases. There are two general ways to represent data. Analog data are continuous. It is analogous to the actual facts it represents. Digital data are discrete and broken up into a limited number of elements. Nature is analog, while computers are digital. Many aspects of our natural world are continuous in nature. For example, think of the spectrum of colors. This is a continuous rainbow of an infinite number of shades. Computer systems, on the other hand, are not continuous, but finite. All data is stored in binary digits, and there is a limit to how much data we can represent. For example, a color image on a computer has a limited number of colors. The number might be very large, but it is still finite. Consider the example of color in a bit more detail. The very first monitor displays were essentially text terminals with only a single color. White or light green text appeared on a black background. Newer monitors used more colors, enough to represent basic images, but still were quite limited. Modern displays have millions of colors and look much more natural. Still, the number of colors is finite. Computer systems work with different types of digital data. In the early days of computing, data consisted primarily of text and numbers. However, in modern-day computing, there are lots of different multimedia data types, such as audio, images, graphics, and video. But, ultimately, all data types are stored as binary digits. For each data type, there are very specific techniques to convert between the binary language of computers and how we interpret data using our senses, such as sight and sound. We can't talk about data without mentioning a database. A database is an organized collection of data. Instead of having all the data in a list with a random order, a database provides a structure to organize the data. One of the most common data structures is a database table.
Okay, so we'll stop that one there because you have to pay for it after the first 5 minutes. But also, that was the main thing I wanted you to see. I wanted you to get a little bit of a rundown about data, what it was, how it can be used, and also how it's stored. And that was a fantastic summary of the key points. So that was a really good video there. All right, so let's take a look at the different ways you can summarize data. Okay, and of course, before you take a look at how to summarize that data, you need to ask yourself the question, what is the purpose? So is the purpose of the data to inform the audience? Is the purpose to show off your abilities for a course? Or is the purpose to make your manager or encourage your supervisors to make it a decision? Are you trying to influence the way that they do things at work or improve things at the business? And different ways of summarising that data, typically in tables, charts, and graphs. So we'll take a look at some of those now. Now, I did take a look on the web for some different examples of bar charts, line graphs, tables, and pie charts. Now, all of these are used for different purposes in mind, so we'll also talk about those now. So let's take a look at the bar chart. Okay, so this one here, another one taken off the web, by the way. The website's at the top here in each of those images as a reference. So I'm not stealing this, I am actually citing the reference to, which is also very important to identify where you gather your information from. So right here we have a graph, we have a bar chart. Now sometimes people mistake these as histograms. Now they're not necessarily histograms. Histograms are connected. There is no gap in between the bars on a histogram, and histograms are continuous. That's why there's no gap. So this particular one here has taken a look at the total amount of produce just down the bottom here, and the number of farms. Also, note that we do have a key or a legend on the right-hand side. So the different colours represent different types of fruit or vegetables. Red is apples, blue for berries, corn is green, we've got purple, and we've also got orange for squash. So, a direct view of this particular graph would show that the most common type of fruit or vegetable produced by farms is berries for farm 2, is berries for farm 1, is berries for farm 4. And that would probably average across each of those as the most common across all of those farms, the most common type of fruit produced. A little bit different here for farm 3, however. Farm 3, the most common type of vegetable or fruit is corn. Could just be that maybe they had a bad season for berries, or the majority of the fruit simply that they've always produced has been corn. We can interpret these graphs in different ways. The most important thing with a graph is to ensure that it's appropriately labelled. So that is the axis at the bottom, which is often referred to as the x-axis, contains often your categorical data. That is, farm 1, farm 2, farm 3 or farm 4. That organises your chart, whereas your continuous data, that is, the number of farms, is on the y-axis. Clearly labelling the graph is very important. Now, the only thing that this graph doesn't have, can anyone identify what this graph is missing? It's looking pretty good, yep. It's got all your labels here at the top and the bottom. Yep. But something's lacking. That's right, a title. What's the graph about? See, it took me a little bit of time to figure out about the type of farm and the produce. Okay, and trying to interpret those x and y axes is difficult unless the graph has a heading. So the heading could either be positioned at the top of the graph or down here underneath the graph, but basically telling the reader what it's all about. So that is a bar chart or bar graph. Let's take a look at line graphs. Alright, so here's another example of a line graph that is not only categorised by legend, but it's also organised by month of the year. And this looks like the first half of the year that we're focusing on. And we've also got numbers here at the side. If we take a look over here, bears are represented by the blue line, dolphins, the red line, whales, the green line. And we can see, by taking a look at this graph straight away, that the month of June, so for the month of June, bears were more common. For the month of February, dolphins were more common. There were roughly 150 dolphins sighted. And we can also see that throughout the year and month to month, particularly the first 6 months of the year, whales have oscillated. And they've been frequent and infrequent, which is rather interesting. So it drops from 80 to roughly 50 goes up, goes down. Every single month we have an influx and outflux of whales. So that's a very interesting graph to take a look at. With line graphs, we are taking a look at often numbers or time. We typically are looking at things that are continuous variables. And again, the importance of having your x and your y axis labelled is crucial. So you notice how you don't have the x-axis label. There's no label there to indicate month. And you're kind of guessing what the y-axis is there. Is it the number of bears, dolphins or whales sighted? Is it the frequency of those animals? Is it the number of deaths? Is it the number of births? You're guessing without a label on the side of that graph. So labels are very important. Tables. Okay, now that didn't load. That did not load. That is surprising. Okay, so let's bring up another table. Sorry about that, guys. That's a bit better. Not really clear though, is it? Okay. It'll provide the example though for us. Keep in mind, I'll adjust that link now for you, so that way you can come back to this site later on and take a look at that. Okay, now this is a really good example of a table. Now, what we're taking a look at here is the disability status of the civilian non-institutional population. So, all of the civilians who are not institutionalised, so that is, they are not in jail, they are not in a mental health ward, they haven't been placed into an asylum of sorts. You've got your totals, or your categories, or your types here in this particular column, and then you've got your different categories here, both sexes, male or female, and the population 5 years and older of disabilities. So there's quite a few people here with disabilities. 19.3%, and that's quite alarming, that's quite high. Population age between 5 and 15 years. Again, we've got the figures here, except they are split into additional categories. So they're different types of disability: sensory, physical, mental. And again, they're arranged by sex, male and female. So as you can see, tables do provide a lot of great information. Now, the information often in tables is exact. It is designed to organise the data into a certain fashion, as opposed to provide the data in a one-stop look, such as your bar graphs and line graphs. Now, one of the easiest charts that I'm going to talk about now is the pie chart. So the pie chart is a really good way of presenting information fast and quick. That's why a lot of sales representatives and a lot of people who work in marketing demonstrate the kind of pie charts. And of course it's a pie because it looks like a pie or a pizza, and it's chopped into different segments. So you can see that this particular graph is split up by type of fruit: apples, grapefruit, oranges, plums or pears. And obviously the largest amount of imported fruits is apples. It takes the largest proportion of this chart up. The smallest is plums. Now this chart is a little bit more specific. It's great in that it identifies here that this colour blue, the darker blue, is for pears, and this lighter blue this turquoise really is for plums, and they've also got the legend there. Now you don't have to have both, just as long as you have one or the other, okay? Because we need to know what each part of the chart identifies. And typically these pie charts are for smaller amounts of data. Typically they're for presenting data as proportions or percentages. So you can have a quick look and see obviously which one takes up more proportion than the other. Sometimes if the proportions are very similar, it may not be a good idea to have a pie chart. So say for instance, if we had plums, oranges and apples as the same, if not similar proportions, it would be very difficult to determine the rank order of the proportions of imported fruits, because you wouldn't be able to identify the difference between those without the actual numbers here. And sometimes those numbers are quite useful. So that's that one there. Now I'm just going to quickly update that link for the table for you. Hyperlink. So how we do that, we go Control, Hyperlink, and Edit Hyperlink. Delete and paste. Okay. Brilliant. So that's been updated for you. File and save. Now, we were talking about the different graphs and adapting the content to suit different audiences. That's great. So that's been covered. Business improvement, we've talked about that. Some businesses do make improvements based on the data provided. So it's important for you to be professional and truthful when you're providing that data. Just because the data says something that one of your managers or supervisors doesn't agree with, doesn't mean that data should not be shown. Data tells a story. Now sometimes, even though we may not want to hear that story, it's important to know it, because, as I mentioned earlier, business decisions are often based on the data that is presented. If you fail to present that data, then business owners and managers cannot present that data appropriately. They can't make decisions based off that data as objectively. It makes business quite difficult, and a lot of the times, if incorrect data is presented, businesses will go backwards. The best way to take a look at the best way to ensure that data is legit before you forward it on is have someone look over it. Now, depending on the sensitivity of that data, will depend on the person that you'd ask. So obviously top secret data for government departments, and I've previously worked for some government departments, some of that data cannot be shown to people outside of your section or outside of your department. And if you show that data, then you can actually be prosecuted for it. So make sure that they have the rights to the data that you have as well, and if they've got the time, ensure that they have the skills appropriate to validate that that data is correct. Often things like reports, before you send them through to managers, it's quite a good idea to have them proofread by someone else. At the end of the day, you're responsible for that work if you're doing it, so you want to make sure it's done as well as possible. So utilise your networks in work and ensure that the work that you're providing is up to the highest possible standard. So a quick discussion now. So the big question is that I'd like you to discuss, talk in my ear too if you do have some feedback about it, or use Messenger. What procedures have you followed to manage or forward data? What procedures have you followed to manage or forward data? Can you think of any during your studies? Have you done any previous positions that involved you using data. As I mentioned earlier, data is pretty much everything. What sort of things can we think of? Uh-huh. Oh, Felicity's got a good one. Yep. Okay. Felicity's just mentioned that she previously worked for a magazine company, and one of the things she needed to do was to proofread some of the columns before they went through to the editor. So she needed to make sure that messages were portrayed clearly and succinctly, and she also needed to make sure that there were no spelling or grammar issues before being forwarded on. So, Felicity, what type of procedure did you follow with that? Were you the last person to review it before the editor? Was there a specific policy or outline in place? Okay, internal. Yep. So internal memos and internal emails, they can be great sources of information for the different policies procedures you should follow. It's obviously important that you do follow those procedures and you find out where they are or what's most appropriate to do. A lot of the times, if you don't do that, then it does backfire. You can be disciplined. You can receive disciplinary action if you don't follow those procedures. But things like proofreading, things like double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking, that always helps. And of course, the different procedures change from different institution and organisation. So it's best to follow up with your organisation which procedure is most appropriate. Okay, that's good. Okay, so we are at 2:30. I did say this would take about 30 minutes, but I just want to quickly demonstrate to you guys, bring up the Privacy Act and have a bit of a mention about the importance of that. All right. So this particular information is available on the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner website. Now, basically, they do have a really good information about the Privacy Act, a really good definition. Basically, they say that the Privacy Act defines personal information as information or an opinion, whether true or not, and whether recorded in a material form or not, about an identified individual or an individual who is reasonably identified. So common examples include things like their name, signature, address, telephone number, date of birth, medical records, bank account details, commentary or opinion about the person. So if you can be identified, then that information is potentially protected under the Privacy Act. So we need to follow different measures to ensure that the information about people, even if it's staff, is held in a sensitive and confidential fashion. And often that is done by having passwords set on computers and ensuring that access is limited to different sections of databases. For example, in one of my previous roles, I worked in administration for a government department. Every single time I accessed a record, I had to enter in a password, and that was linked up to the user ID, which which of course was linked up to my profile as a staff member. So every single time I accessed a record, they knew that I was accessing that record. When I was downloading data, they knew I was downloading data, and they could track that information just in case if something happened later on down the track, I would be held responsible for that. So we're each responsible for the privacy of people's information. It's a safeguard to ensure that we protect individuals and we protect their identities. And of course, there's also the Australian privacy principles too that we need to follow to ensure that that information remains private, and we do our very best to ensure that information is only disclosed to authorised parties. Okay, so that's the 30 minutes. So I'll just wrap up quickly. So today we've spoken about how to explain and present data in your workplace. We've provided some examples of the different types of data, both digital and analog, by watching that video earlier on. We've taken a look at the different tables, charts and graphics. We've had bar charts, line graphs, tables and pie charts. We've discussed those. We've discussed where they're best to be used, what to do and what not to do. The importance of adapting content for different audiences, taking into consideration the context and the purpose of what you're presenting. And we've also spoken about the importance of being truthful and professional with data, validating data and proofreading data before forwarding it on, and abiding by the Privacy Act. So I hope that that's been a great session for you guys. If you do have any further questions, feel free to send me an email. I am aware we are over our time slot, but we might need to wrap that up there. Is there anything else before I wrap things up? Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm going to send you some feedback forms too. If you could complete those, that would be absolutely brilliant, and that way I can send them off to my trainer. Thank you very much for participating in these sessions. That's much appreciated. I hope you've got a lot out of them. Great. All right, I'll speak to you soon.